Hello, Mr. Giduyot. It's Tuesday, August 16th. This is Africa 54.
Raila Odinga declares the Kenyan presidential elections results null and void, while 4 election commissioners refuse to acknowledge the final vote tally. A controversial resettlement and land distribution plan by Amhara authorities in Ethiopia's western Tigray draws protests from local residents. And in our health report, billions of people worldwide lack access to safe, affordable surgical care. We'll have a report.
We begin in East Africa, where just one day after Kenya's Independent Elections and Boundaries Commission announced William Ruto as the winner of Kenya's presidential race, the losing side is speaking out. Raila Odinga publicly announced Tuesday that figures announced by the commission are null and void and must be questioned by a court of law. Meanwhile, 4 IEBC commissioners who disowned the election results say the parties should seek resolution through the court. Africa 54 managing editor Vincent Makori has more.
At a media briefing in Nairobi, Azimio coalition presidential candidate Raila Odinga said his coalition totally rejects the election results, but at the same time urged his supporters to maintain peace.
But suffice it to note that we will be pursuing all constitutional and legal options available to us. We will do so because we regard the many flaws in the elections and the wrongs committed by the IEBC as fatal to the process and the outcome announced by Mr. Chebukati.
On the campaign trail, both Odinga and Ruto had pledged to deal with any disputes in court rather than on the streets. Any challenge must be made within 7 days to the Supreme Court, which then has 14 days to issue a ruling. If it orders an annulment, a new vote must be held within 60 days. Moments before Mr. Odinga spoke, 4 of Kenya's 7 election commissioners held a press conference and said they stood by their decision a day earlier to disown the results of the August 9th presidential election. Speaking for the group, Electoral Commission Deputy Chairperson Juliana Cherera said the results that gave current Deputy President William Ruto a thin victory over Raila Odinga were erroneously aggregated.
We state categorically that the results of the presidential election held in August 9, 2022, declared and announced by Mr. Wafula Chebukati on August 15, 2022, belonged to himself and do not represent the declaration and announcement by Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission. The Commission has to process the results before they are declared and announced by the chairperson.
Kenya was calm on Tuesday, and more people could be seen going about their businesses after days of suspense and anxiety, waiting for the IEBC to announce the winner of the presidential race. In Nairobi, some shops remained shuttered on Tuesday due to uncertainty. I'm in Kibra, one of the biggest slums in Nairobi, and it's considered the stronghold of Mr. Raila Odinga, the presidential candidate for the Azimio coalition. Now, it's a day after the election results were announced by the chairman, Mr. Wafula Chebukati, and as all might have noticed, Mr. Raila Odinga boycotted that ceremony, along with some of the commissioners of the IEBC who claimed they cannot take ownership of that result. So we came around here to hear from the people of Kibra and find out what they plan to do next. And the majority of them are telling us they're waiting to hear from Mr. Raila Odinga himself.
According to Kenyan constitution, if they're releasing the result, at least 4 commissioners should comply or should accept the result. And you can see the 4 of them walked away. So he remained with 3. That really shows that the election, the result was not unfair. So what we should do is that first, we're waiting for what Raila will say. Secondly, if he won't talk even right now, we as Young Turks will file the petition in the Supreme Court.
Obada rejected the characterization of Odinga supporters as perennial protesters.
Raila's people are not chaotic. We're just optimistic we know what we want. And that's why sometimes we feel that if you can't get it peacefully, sometimes we try to use force.
Here's another Odinga supporter.
The only thing I think will follow next is like Azimio will go to court and the court will give us the way forward. Yeah.
Others just want to see people move on with their lives.
Just tell my fellow Kenyans for us all to unite together and then rebuild our country, mostly our economy and all we're passing through, and let's unite all and become one.
We're supposed to have a peace because even if you do anything, it cannot help us. We need our children to go back to school.
No poll outcome has gone uncontested in Kenya since 2002. Now, the aftermath of the largely peaceful vote will be keenly watched as a test of democratic maturity in the East African powerhouse where previous elections have been marred by claims of rigging and violence.
And standing by live via Skype in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, is Africa 54 managing editor Vincent Makori. Vincent, this has been a closely followed election. So what can we expect in the court moving forward?
Well, this is going to be very interesting because there are conflicting opinions as to whether Mr. Wafula Chebukati acted within the law by announcing those elections despite half of the commissioners rejecting them and walking away. So what we've seen is that some lawyers are saying, and one of them that is quoted is Professor Makau Mutua, who is a professor of law actually in the US and is affiliated with the Azimio coalition. He says it is illegitimate what he did because there's a requirement that all the commissioners have to be in agreement. But then other lawyers have said, no, Mr. Chebukati is the sole returning officer for the presidential race. The other commissioners have no business to do with the presidential race. So first, those two divergent views will have to clash in the court of law to determine whether first he was within his right to do that. The next thing will be, were there errors, and what will those commissioners tell the courts if they're required to come before the Supreme Court, or what other evidence does the Azimio coalition have that it will present in court? It's going to be very interesting times ahead of us.
As you prepared the report that we just watched and heard from you, you were surrounded by a lot of people who are supporters of Raila Odinga. But after he spoke, what has been the reaction in Nairobi?
Pretty much the same. You know, one of the things about Raila's supporters is that they listened to him. They were waiting to hear what he's going to say. And that was just a few minutes before he spoke. And he told them, maintain peace, do not take the law into your hands, and just wait for us to exhaust the legal and constitutional means that we have within our arsenal. So as far as they're concerned, they will maintain calm, they will maintain peace, because Mr. Raila Odinga has told them to do so. And that is one of the things about Raila's supporters. They act on cue. And so if the cue is to maintain peace, they will maintain peace. And that's what we are witnessing. The whole country is calm, including areas like Kibera or even Kisumu, his ancestral home.
Very quickly, Vincent, has outgoing President Uhuru Kenyatta spoken since President-elect William Ruto was declared the winner?
We haven't seen him. We haven't heard from him. He hasn't spoken.
Thank you so much. Vincent Makori reporting live for us there in Nairobi. Now, millions of African migrants lose their lives every year as they attempt to make the perilous journey across the Mediterranean Sea to Europe, hoping for better lives. More often than not, those who make it face rejection upon arrival. Others have been displaced by conflict and drought at home. And for more discussion on the subject, I'm joined right here in the studio by Mohamed Abdikar, Director General for International Organization for Migration, East and Horn of Africa. Mr. Abdikar, a very warm welcome to you on Africa 54. You are in charge of a very volatile region right now. There's an internal conflict going on in Ethiopia and the threat of Al-Shabaab in Somalia. There are feuds between countries in the Central African Republic. But what are the core issues driving so many Africans to leave their native countries and to look for better lives elsewhere?
Thank you again for having me, Esther. Three main issues that drive us for migration in our region. One is the political instability that causes a large number of people to be displaced within their own countries or to cross borders. The second one is obviously economic disparity that we've seen with the COVID-19 pandemic that was going on the last few years. The number of people who've gone through the poverty, below the poverty line, has just increased. And the last one is climate change. And I'm more than happy to expand on those three issues as well.
Let's talk about that because it's important. This is happening. A lot of people think it's it's just a joke. But climate change has an impact on people. What are you seeing, especially in the Horn of Africa?
Right now, we have close to 18 million people who are food insecure in the Horn of Africa. And just in Somalia alone, we declared about a few days ago over 1 million people have been displaced because of drought. And we're talking about 4 consecutive rainy seasons that have not rained in the region. If we get the 5th one, we might come to a famine situation in Somalia. In 2011, we had close to 200 million people who died. So we might have even more people die if we don't do much more in Somalia specifically. But the drought is not just in Somalia, it's in Somalia, it's in Ethiopia, it's in northeastern Kenya, it's in Djibouti as well.
Now, you've talked to various government officials in the Horn of Africa, Central Africa as well. What do you see as the government's responsibility to stop this migration of Africans from their countries? And what does this do to their own people, their own countries, in terms of depleting the resources and skills from their own
I think one of the most important things about climate change, I'll start with that, because we just had a big Kampala declaration in Uganda, where we brought in about 19 governments in Africa, including countries as far as Egypt, Algeria, Senegal, and Zambia, with the Horn of Africa countries and East African community, together with the regional economic blocs, IGAD and East African community. And bringing them together was very much to talk about what do we do about climate situation in our region. First and foremost, what are we going to do about the drought? What are we going to do? Second, about adaptation. How are we going to adapt? Because it's going to be with us for a very long time. And third is about what can we do with the international community and how can we make sure that during COP27 discussion in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt in November, Africa has a message on mobility and migration in the region.
And very briefly, what does IOM do to help survivors?
Right now, we're providing shelter, we're providing water and sanitation, we're drilling boreholes, we're providing even transportation for Africans who are stranded in Libya, in Yemen, in Djibouti, in Somalia, back to Ethiopia. So we provide all the assistance required for our migrants.
Mohamed, thank you so much. Mohamed Abdikar is the Director General for International Organization for Migration, East, Horn and Central Africa region. The White House says its new Africa policy is based on establishing quality, promoting open societies and democracy, and working toward pandemic recovery and climate change adaptation. During his recent tour, the U.S. Secretary of State touted these objectives and the new relationship between the U.S. and its 50-plus partners on the continent. VOA's Anita Powell reports from Washington.
Equality at last. That is what U.S. President Joe Biden's reframed Africa strategy pledges to the fastest-growing continent. Secretary of State Antony Blinken summed it up thusly during his whirlwind trip to Africa last week.
What we seek most of all is a true partnership between the United States and Africa. We don't want an imbalanced or transactional relationship. And our commitment to a stronger partnership with Africa is not about trying to outdo anyone else.
Except, Africa watchers say, the two countries loom large. China, whose Belt and Road Infrastructure Initiative has crossed the continent, and Russia, whose foreign minister also took a recent tour of the continent to remind African nations of old ties from the post-liberation era.
I think the shift in rhetoric is an important one, and also one that is really aimed at countering China's use of the term partnership, economic development partners, that has been well received across the African continent in terms of being more respectful.
The White House says this will be exemplified later this year at a revamp of 2014's U.S.-Africa Summit. At that summit, then President Barack Obama made a point of not inviting Zimbabwean leader Robert Mugabe, who grew increasingly authoritarian before his death in 2019. And he's not the only African leader to have served for several decades, a challenge to the U.S. policy of pushing democratization.
I think the United States is in a very interesting, juncture here, where if you have to try and at least appear to want to have, everybody around the table, even people that, you rather not have around. So I expect there will be, lots of African leaders there.
And he said there is a real sense that this policy, while materially not too different from previous policies, carries a note of truth and reconciliation.
What I like about it is, so there's a particular language about the United States saying, we think we may have acted dishonorably. It doesn't use that word, but something similar in the past. We've not always been true to our word, but hey, we want to wipe the slate clean.
So is this a fresh start? In these uncertain times, the U.S. clearly hopes so. Anita Powell, VOA News, Washington.
Johannesburg-based Thungela Resources is reporting half-year profits 20 times larger than the year before, as the coal exporter says South Africa's coal sales to Europe have risen 8-fold amid sanctions in Russia. Trevor Carroll reports.
South Africa's coal sales to Europe rose 8-fold in the first half of 2022 as demand surged ahead of a ban on imports of the fossil fuel from Russia. That's according to Johannesburg-based coal exporter Thungela Resources, which on Monday reported half-year profits 20 times larger than the year before. The boost was driven by Thungela's realized average price rising to $240 per ton during the half year to June 30th, compared to $75 a ton last year because of the higher demand.
Adopted.
In April, the European Union announced a ban on coal imports from Russia as part of sanctions over the war in Ukraine. It came into effect on August 10th, but ahead of the ban, European countries, which previously relied on Russia for 45% of their coal, began sourcing elsewhere. Thungela said Europe was competing with Asia for South African coal. The company is part of a consortium that owns Africa's largest coal export facility, the Richards Bay Coal Terminal. Thungela's chief financial officer Dion Smith said coal exports from the RBCT had risen by 720% year-on-year to around 4.5 million U.S. tons in the first half of 2022. But CEO July Ndlovu said South Africa was not able to take full advantage because of its deteriorating rail infrastructure. Poor maintenance, a lack of locomotives, and copper cable theft have diminished the capacity of state-owned rail company Transnet. As a result of the difficulties in getting coal to port, Thungela has revised down its production guidance for 2022. The company, which was spun off from mining giant Anglo American in June last year, said it would return 8.2 billion rand, or a little over $500 million, to shareholders.
Trevor Carroll of Reuters filed that report. We'd like to hear what you think about Africa 54, and still to come in our health report, an update on monkeypox and the latest on affordable surgical care. But first, Haiti Adams tells us what's coming up on Wednesday's Straight Talk Africa.
On the next Straight Talk Africa, William Ruto has been declared the president-elect of Kenya after a very tight race. We'll talk about the political and economic challenges ahead in Kenya. We'll also preview the August 24th general elections in Angola. President João Lourenço is running for a second term. Join me, Haiti Adams, on the next Straight Talk Africa.
around the world. Let's go.
In other African news, the United States has imposed sanctions on 3 Liberian government officials, including President George Weah's chief of staff, for what it says is their ongoing involvement in public corruption. And the European Union is planning a 5-fold increase in financial support to an African military mission in Mozambique as Islamist attacks threaten gas projects meant to reduce the EU's reliance on Russian energy. It's time for a health segment, and joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lino Mudu with an update on monkeypox and the latest on affordable surgical care. Hello, Lino.
Hello, Esther. The World Health Organization has renamed variants of the virus monkeypox. The Congo Basin is now clade 1 and clade 2 for the West African variants, with 2 subclades. A global expert group decided on the new naming convention as part of ongoing efforts to align the names with current best practices. The WHO is also examining new names for the monkeypox virus as a whole after concerns over potential stigmatization. In other outbreaks, researchers have detected a new virus, the Lengia-henipavirus, or LAV-V, suspected to have infected at least 35 people in eastern China. They believe it may have spread directly or indirectly to people from shrews, small mole-like mammals found in a wide variety of habitats between 2018 and 2021. Symptoms have appeared to be mostly mild, including fever, fatigue, cough, loss of appetite, muscle aches, nausea, and headache. About 5 billion people worldwide lack access to safe, affordable surgical care, according to data from the WHO. A significant proportion live in sub-Saharan Africa, where up to 50% of the population are children. Experts say pediatric surgery in Africa is hampered by late presentation, limited resources and facilities. For more insight, I spoke with Dr. Tihitena Negusi Mamo, Global Clinical Director at LifeBox and the clinical lead for the Smile Train LifeBox Safe Surgery and Anesthesia Initiative. Take a look.
Children are not small adults, so they need special type of care and management. So people specialized in that area should be there to avail the necessary service for these kids. Unfortunately, there is significant gap both in surgical field and anesthesia field for serving the kids. Some of the resources which are made for adults are not fit enough for children to be cared, including monitoring devices, treatment, fluids, or others. So those things results in significant compromisation in the care of kids.
Smile Train has announced the Safe Surgery and Anesthesia Initiative in partnership with LifeBox, aiming to make surgery safer in low-resource setting. Tell us more about the initiative. What does it look like?
Basically working on addressing the gaps on tools as well as human resource capacities. So the tools and the capacities will be helpful in filling the gap by availing the devices in the needy sites and also delivering trainings whenever the need arises. One of the important tools which should not be missed in surgical patient care was pulse oximetry.
Talk to us about implementing this project. What countries will participate? Where will you be deploying this resource?
In the next 3 years, the plan of the initiative is at least to distribute this co-branded pulse oximetry in at least 20 countries. Around 11,000 pulse oximetries are planned to be distributed and started to be distributed right now. Some of the countries are Kenya, Rwanda, Somaliland, Senegal, Madagascar, El Salvador, Ecuador, Laos, so representing Africa, South America, as well as Asia. We are trying to address all pediatric surgical patients. Some specific emphasis might be given for cleft palate and cleft lip patients, but all pediatric surgery patients will be addressed by the benefit of this initiative.
You mentioned the cleft lip palate. How much of a problem is it?
It is one of the commonest congenital anomaly. Fortunately, it is visible to diagnose unless it is isolated cleft palate. The care might be difficult to get on time because of some taboo or social issues in the area, but it is easily diagnosed by parents, the community health workers, as well as the medical professionals. It is common, just like the cardiac anomalies and others worldwide.
What is the status now in terms of acceptance, understanding of this condition, and also treatment for the condition on the continent?
Definitely cleft palate and lip surgery, one of the surgery which needs good anesthesia care and dedicated surgical care, because it is the area where both surgeons and anesthesia are working in the mouth area. So it is one of the challenging areas. Starting from the Smile Prince work worldwide, it has to be addressed by creating awareness, collaborating with surgeons on those fields so that they can identify the patient and avail the services. Compared to like 10 or 11 years back, now there's service getting by these individuals or patients, and there is a good outcome on the operated patients.
What will be considered a safe surgery?
Safe surgery means preventing preventable causes of complications after surgery. Surgery is not a thing without complications, but if you address human error as well as system error, 50% of the complication can be easily avoided. So that's why I'm stressing on safer practices.
As the clinical lead of the initiative, what will a successful project look like for you?
I want to make sure that every service is delivered for the patients should be in a safe and quality way. In order to address that, we will try to look for colleagues who will identify the gaps there. So if it is training, we will avail training. If it is tool, we will try to distribute the tools as much as possible. So those are the ways we are addressing the problem.
And that's today's health report. To stay in touch, find me on Twitter at Linor Moudou. Esther?
Thanks, Lino. Be sure to watch Lino Moudou's health reports every Tuesday right here on Africa 54. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, thanks for watching.